Once upon a time, there dwelled on the outskirts of a large forest a poor woodcutter with his wife and 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. He always had little enough to live on, and once when times were bad, they had to get by with 1 piece of bread and butter each. One night, as he was tossing about in bed, full of cares and worry, he sighed to his wife. "Oh, what's to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children, now that we have nothing more for ourselves?"
"I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Early tomorrow morning we'll take the children out into the thickest part of the wood. There we shall light a fire for them and give them each a piece of bread. Then we'll go on our walk and leave them alone. They won't be able to find their way home, and we shall be rid of them."
"No, wife," said the husband, "that I won't do. How could I find it in my heart to leave my children alone in the wood? The wild beasts would soon come and tear them to pieces."
"Oh, you fool," she said. "Then we must all 4 die of hunger. You may just as well go and saw the boards for our coffins."
They argued and argued till he agreed that they must be rid of Hansel and Gretel. "But I can't help but feeling sorry for the poor children," added the husband. The children, too, had not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly and spoke to Hansel. "Now it's all up to us." No, Gretel," said Hansel. "Don't fret yourself. I'll be able to find our way to escape. No fear." When the old people had fallen asleep, he got up, slipped on his little coat, opened the back door, and stole out. The moon was shining clearly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like bits of silver. Hansel bent down and filled his pocket with as many of them as he could cram in. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, my dear little sister, and go to sleep. God will not desert us." And he lay down in bed again. At daybreak, even before the sun was up, the woman came and woke the 2 children.
"Get up, you lie-a-beds. We're all going to the forest to fetch wood."
She gave them each a bit of bread and said,
"There's something for your luncheon, but don't you eat it all up beforehand, for it's all you'll get."
Gretel took the bread under her apron, and Hansel had the stones in his pocket. And then they all set out together on the way to the forest. After they had walked a little, Hansel stood still and looked back at the house, and this maneuver he repeated again and again. His father observed him and said, "Hansel, why are you gazing at there? Why do you always remain behind? Take care, don't lose your footing." "Oh, Father," said Hansel, "I am looking back at my white kitten, which is sitting on the roof, waving me farewell." The woman exclaimed,
"What a donkey you are! That isn't your kitten. That's the morning sun shining on the chimney."
But Hansel had not looked back at his kitten, but had always dropped one of the white pebbles out of his pocket on the path. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, go and fetch a lot of wood, and I'll light a fire so that you may not feel the cold." Hansel and Gretel heaped up brushwood until they had made a pile nearly the size of a small hill. The brushwood was set fire to. When the flames leapt high, the woman said,
"Now lie down at the fire, children, and rest yourselves. We're going into the forest to cut down wood. When we're finished, we'll come back and fetch you."
Hansel and Gretel sat down beside the fire, and at midday ate their little bits of bread. They heard the strokes of an axe, so they thought their father was quite near. But it was no axe they heard, but a bough he had tied on a dead tree that was blown about by the wind. When they had sat for a long time with their eyes closed with fatigue, they fell fast asleep. When they awoke at last, it was pitch dark. Gretel began to cry and said, "How will we ever get out of the wood?" Hansel comforted her. "Wait a bit," he said, "until the moon is up, and then we'll find our way sure enough." When the moon had risen, he took his sister by the hand and followed the pebbles, which shone like new 3-penny bits, and showed them the path. They walked on through the night, and at daybreak reached their father's house again. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it, she exclaimed,
"You naughty children, what a time you've slept in the wood too! We thought you were never going to come back."
The father rejoiced, for his conscience had reproached him for leaving his children behind by themselves. Not long afterwards, again, there was great dearth in the land, and the children heard their mother address their father thus in bed one night again.
"Everything is eaten up once more. We only have half a loaf in the house, and when that's gone, it's all up with us. The children must be gotten rid of. We'll lead them deeper into the woods this time, so they won't be able to find their way out again. There's no way of saving ourselves."
The man's heart smote him heavily. He thought, surely it would be better to share a last bite with one's children. But his wife wouldn't listen to his arguments. It did nothing but scold and reproach him. If a man yields once, he's done for. And so, because his arguments did nothing, but because he had given in the first time, he was forced to do so the second. The children were awake again and had heard the conversation. When the old people were asleep, Hansel got up and wanted out to go pick pebbles up again, as he had done the first time, but the woman had barred the door, and Hansel couldn't get out. He consoled his little sister and said, "Don't cry, Gretel, and sleep peacefully, for God is sure to help us." At early dawn the woman came up and made the children get up. They received their bit of bread, but it was even smaller than the time before. On the way to the wood, Hansel crumbled it in his pocket, and every few minutes he stood still and dropped a crumb on the ground. "Hansel, what are you stopping and looking about you for?" said the father.
"I am looking back at my little pigeon, which is sitting on the roof, waving me a farewell," answered Hansel. "Fool," said the wife, "that isn't your pigeon, but the morning sun glittering on the chimney."
But Hansel gradually threw all of his crumbs on the path. The woman led the children still deeper into the forest, farther than they had ever been in their lives. When a big fire was lit again, the mother said,
"Just sit down there, children, and if you're tired, you can sleep a little bit. We're going into the forest to cut down wood, and in the evening, when we're finished, we'll come back to fetch you."
At midday, Gretel divided her bread with Hansel, for he had strewn all along their path. When they fell asleep, evening passed away, and nobody came to the poor children. They didn't awake until it was pitch dark, and Hansel comforted his sister, saying, "Only wait, Gretel, till the moon rises, then we shall see breadcrumbs I scattered along the path. They will show us the way back to the house." When the moon appeared, they got up, but they found no crumbs, for the thousands of birds that fly about the woods of the fields had picked them all up. "Never mind," said Hansel to Gretel. "You'll see, we'll find a way out." But all the same they did not. They wandered about the whole night and the next day, from morning till evening, but they could not find a path out of the wood. They were very hungry, too, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries they found growing on the ground. They were so tired that their legs refused to carry them any longer, so they lay down under a tree and fell fast asleep. On the third morning, after they had left their father's house, they set about their wandering again, but only got deeper and deeper into the wood, and now they felt as if help did not come to them soon, that they might perish. At midday, they saw a beautiful little snow-white bird sitting on a branch, which sang so sweetly that they stopped still and listened to it. When its song was finished, it flapped its wings and flew on in front of them. They followed it, and it came to a little house, on the roof of which it perched. They came quite near and saw that the cottage was made out of bread with roofed cakes, while the window was made of transparent sugar. "Now we'll set to," said Hansel, "and have a regular blowout. I'll eat a little bit of roof, and you, Gretel, eat some of the window, which you'll find a sweet morsel." Hansel stretched up his hand and broke off a little bit of the roof to see what it was like, and Gretel went to the easement and began to nibble at it. And thereupon a shrill voice called out from the room inside,
"Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who is nibbling on my house?"
The children answered, "'Tis heavens, old child, the tempest wild," and kept on eating, without putting themselves about. Hansel, who thoroughly appreciated the roof, tore down a big bit of it, while Gretel pushed out a whole round window pane, and sat down the better to enjoy it. Suddenly the door opened, and an ancient dame, leering on a staff, hobbled out. Hansel and Gretel were so terrified that they let what they had in their hands fall. The old woman shook her hands and said, "Oh ho, you dear children, what led you here? Just come in and stay with me. No ill shall befall you." She took them by the hand and led them into the house, and laid a most sumptuous dinner before them, milk and sugared pancakes with apples and nuts. After they'd finished, 2 beautiful little white beds were prepared for them. When Hansel and Gretel lay down in them, it felt as if they had gone to heaven. The old woman had appeared to be friendly, but she was really an old witch who had waylaid the children and had only built the little house in order to lure them in. When anyone came into her power, she killed, cooked, and ate them, and held a regular feast day for the occasion. Now, witches have red eyes and cannot see far, but like beasts have a keen sense of smell, and know when human beings pass by. When Hansel and Gretel fell into her hands, she laughed maliciously and said cheeringly,
"I've got them now. They shan't escape me."
Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she rose up. When she saw them sleeping so peacefully with their rosy round cheeks, she muttered to herself,
"That'll be a dainty bite."
Then she seized Hansel with her bony hand and carried him into a little stable and barred the door on him. He might have screamed as much as he liked. It would have done him no good. Then she went to Gretel, shook her until she awoke, and cried,
"Get up, you lazy bones! Fetch water and cook something for your brother. When he's fat, I'll eat him up."
Gretel began to cry bitterly, but it was of no use. She had to do what the wicked witch bade her. So the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, and Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the old woman hobbled out to the stable and cried,
"Hansel, put out your finger that I may feel if you're getting fat."
But Hansel always stretched out a bone, and the old dame, whose eyes were dim, couldn't see it. Thinking always it was Hansel's finger, she wondered why he fattened so slowly. When 4 weeks had passed and Hansel still remained thin, she lost patience, determined to wait no longer.
"Ha, Gretel," she called to the girl, "be quick and get some water. Hansel may be fat or thin, but I'm going to kill him tomorrow and cook him."
Oh, how the poor little sister sobbed as she carried the water, and how the tears rolled down her cheeks. "Kind heaven, help us now," she cried. "If only the wild beasts in the wood had eaten us, then at least we would have died together."
"Just hold your peace," said the old hag. "It won't help you."
Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang up the kettle full of water and light the fire.
"First we'll bake," said the dame. "I've already heated the oven and kneaded the dough."
She pushed Gretel out to the oven, from which fiery flames were already issuing.
"Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it's properly heated so we may shove in the bread."
But when she had got Gretel in, she meant to close the oven and let the girl bake, that she might gobble her up too. But Gretel perceived her intention and said, "I don't know how to do it. How do I get in?"
"You silly goose," said the hag. "The opening is big enough. See, I can get in myself."
She crawled towards it and poked her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a shove that sent her flying in, shut the door, and drew the bolt. "Gracious!" how she yelled. It was quite horrible. But Gretel fled, and the wretched old woman was left to perish miserably. Gretel flew straight to Hansel and opened the little stable door and cried, "Hansel, we're free! The old witch is dead!" Then Hansel sprang like a bird out of his cage as the door opened. How they rejoiced, fell on each other's necks, jumped for joy, and they had no longer any cause for fear. They went in the old hag's house, and here they found, in every corner of the room, boxes with pearls and precious stones. "Oh, these are even better than pebbles," said Hansel, and crammed his pockets full of them. And Gretel said, "I too will bring some home," and filled her apron full. "Now," said Hansel, "let's go and get well away from the witch's wood." When they had wandered about for some hours, they came to a big lake. "We can't get over," said Hansel. "I see no bridge of any sort or kind." "Yes, and there's no ferry boat either," answered Gretel. "But look, there swims a white duck. I'll ask her if she'll help us over," she called out. Here are two children, mournful very, seeing neither bridge nor ferry. Take us upon your white back and row us over. Quack, quack. The duck swam towards them, and Hansel got on her back and bade his little sisters sit beside him. No, answered Gretel. We should be too heavy a load for a duck. She shall carry us across separately. The good bird did this, and when they landed safely on the other side, they had gone for a while. The wood became more and more familiar to them, and at length they saw their father's house in the distance. They set off to run, and bounding into the room fell on their father's neck. The man had not passed a happy hour since he left them in the wood, and the old woman he had married had died. Gretel shook out her apron so that the pearls and precious stones rolled about the room. Hansel threw down one handful after another out of his pocket. Thus all their troubles were ended, and they lived happily ever